The Antikythera Mechanism. In 1901, sponge divers working the seabed off the remote Greek island of Antikythera surfaced with what at first seemed to be a corroded lump of bronze and wood. It was tossed aside as debris from a Roman shipwreck until decades later, when X-rays revealed something impossible. An ancient machine built with a complexity that should not have existed for another 1,000 years. The device became known as the Antikythera Mechanism, and it would shatter everything we thought we knew about the technology of the ancient world. This mysterious relic, dated to around 100 BCE, contains at least 37 bronze gears, precise to the millimeter, set within a compact box-like frame. Its function? To predict celestial events with a level of accuracy unmatched until the 14th century. It tracked the cycles of the moon and sun, predicted eclipses, and charted the movements of the 5 known planets. The mechanism could even forecast the timing of the ancient Olympic Games. In essence, it was a mechanical computer built during a time when iron chisels were still a marvel. Researchers were stunned. This wasn't theoretical. It worked. Simulations proved that, once reconstructed, the device's complex gear trains mirrored astronomical models precisely. The Greeks didn't just understand the heavens, they had built a machine that could calculate them mechanically. But this knowledge didn't evolve over centuries. It appeared, fully formed, then vanished without a trace. No other device like it has ever been found. No workshop, no blueprints, no records. It was as if the Antikythera Mechanism was the product of a civilization that should never have existed, or a branch of science that was deliberately cut short. The implications were dangerous. If this level of engineering existed 2,000 years ago, what else had been lost? What traditions? What technologies? What minds had been silenced? Who benefited from ensuring history forgot that such intelligence ever existed? Shortly after its reconstruction, academic interest was quietly redirected. Funding dried up. Museums displayed replicas with little fanfare. Schools never included it in textbooks. The narrative remained fixed. Ancient civilizations were brilliant philosophers, but never advanced engineers. But the tragedy isn't just academic. What if the Antikythera Mechanism wasn't unique? What if it was the last surviving fragment of an ancient scientific revolution snuffed out by empire, by war, or by design? Imagine the technological leap mankind could have made. A clockwork universe unlocked centuries early. Navigation, astronomy, even automation accelerated by millennia. Instead, it sank into the depths of the Aegean, hidden until chance brought it back. One device. One warning. That what lies beneath the sea may not just rewrite history, it may reveal how much of it was erased. Dwarka. The sunken city of Krishna. Off the coast of Gujarat, India, divers stumbled upon something that should not exist. Massive stone structures submerged beneath the Arabian Sea. For centuries, the city of Dwarka was thought to be nothing more than myth, a sacred tale from Hindu scripture. According to legend, it was the majestic city built by Lord Krishna himself, a fortified metropolis of unimaginable wealth and beauty, which was eventually reclaimed by the sea. Scholars dismissed it as religious folklore until the ocean gave up its secret. Between 1983 and the early 2000s, the National Institute of Ocean Technology uncovered extensive ruins lying 20-40 feet below the water's surface. Archaeologists documented walls, pillars, steps, and grids resembling a planned city. Carbon dating of stone tools and pottery pulled from the site suggested a construction date between 7,500 and 9,500 years ago, at least 4,000 years older than any known Indian civilization. If true, this would predate the Indus Valley civilization by millennia. It would mean that complex urban planning, maritime trade, and megalithic construction were occurring long before history claims they should have. The city's layout matched descriptions in ancient texts, like the Mahabharata, where Dwarka was said to have had 900,000 palaces, grand gates, and flourishing ports. Even more disturbing to Orthodox historians, satellite imagery revealed geometric shapes, roads, grids, and platforms stretching for miles along the seafloor. The discoveries lined up too closely with myth to be ignored. And yet, they were. Instead of celebrating a rewriting of world history, the findings were met with silence. Major archaeological institutions declined to explore further. Indian officials initially boasted about the discovery, but soon retracted, downplaying the significance. International journals refused to publish deeper investigations. Dissenting archaeologists were told to either reinterpret the data or be left out of future funding. Why? Because if Dwarka is real, then entire timelines collapse. It suggests that advanced civilization arose not in Mesopotamia or Egypt but in India, thousands of years earlier than accepted. That humans possessed city-building capabilities, maritime infrastructure, and sacred architecture at a time when they were supposedly still hunter-gatherers. The implications would shake academia, geopolitics, and even religious narratives. But the cost of suppression is higher than pride. If humanity had already achieved urbanization, culture, and technology during the last ice age, then what else was lost in the deluge? How many cities like Dwarka remain hidden beneath rising seas? And how many have been found only to be silenced? Dwarka may not just be a city swallowed by the ocean. It may be the first casualty in a war against history itself, a war to erase everything that came before the sanctioned version of civilization. And we're only beginning to see the cracks in the story. The submerged ruins of Fuxian Lake. At first glance, Fuxian Lake in Yunnan Province, China, seems tranquil, a mirror of water surrounded by lush hills. But below its surface lies a secret too massive to ignore. A sprawling complex of stone structures resting 40 meters beneath the waves. For centuries, local legends spoke of a city that vanished into the lake. Most dismissed it as folklore until 2001, when a government-backed underwater survey shattered all assumptions. Sonar scans revealed over 30 separate structures, covering 2.4 square kilometers of lakebed. Divers reported stepped platforms, immense blocks weighing hundreds of tons, and roads that twisted through what appeared to be a forgotten metropolis. The symmetry was too perfect, the angles too sharp to be natural. Carbon-dated relics retrieved from the site suggested the ruins were at least 1,750 years old. But other features, like advanced masonry techniques and the sheer scale of the layout, hinted at something even older, possibly predating known Chinese dynasties by millennia. Authorities dubbed it the Underwater Pyramid Complex and then, almost immediately, sealed off access to the site. Researchers were told to halt further dives. Media coverage was abruptly cut short. No international teams were invited to validate the findings. It was as though the discovery never happened. Why? Because if proven to be a city older than any previously recorded in East Asia, it would upend not only Chinese history, but the accepted trajectory of human civilization. A new center of innovation would have to be acknowledged. Cultures once labeled primitive would have to be reconsidered. Fuxian Lake threatened a tightly controlled narrative, one that places the birth of civilization neatly in the Fertile Crescent and dismisses all else as peripheral. The structures include pyramidal forms, rectangular halls, and multi-tiered platforms features far too complex to be the result of erosion. Aerial maps matched up with ancient texts describing the kingdom of Yuyuan, said to have mysteriously vanished after a great flood or seismic catastrophe. The ruins beneath Fuxian may not only confirm this legend, they may be the last traces of a lost civilization deliberately hidden beneath layers of water, sediment, and silence. And still, no excavation has resumed. No museum exhibits. No documentaries aired on mainstream channels. The site remains cloaked in bureaucratic obstruction, as if what lies beneath the lake is too dangerous to the world above. What was buried under Fuxian Lake was not just stone and mortar, it was evidence. Evidence that another story exists. One where knowledge did not evolve slowly, but surged, and then was submerged. A story where the lake's still surface conceals the ruins of a civilization erased not by time but by design. The Bimini Road. In 1968, just off the coast of North Bimini Island in the Bahamas, a team of divers discovered something that defied natural explanation. A half-mile-long formation of massive, rectangular limestone blocks resting beneath just 20 feet of turquoise water. The stones, some as large as 13 feet across, were fitted together with uncanny precision, forming what appeared to be a paved road, seawall, or breakwater. Locals called it the Bimini Road. But for many, it was something far more profound, evidence of a sunken civilization, perhaps even Atlantis itself. The timing of the discovery was unsettling. It came just months after famed mystic Edgar Cayce had predicted that remains of Atlantis would begin to rise near Bimini in 1968 or 1969. Suddenly, the impossible seemed plausible. The blocks were polygonal, seemingly cut, some aligned in near-perfect right angles. Divers reported multi-layered stones and vertical alignments resembling columns or pylons. Underwater sonar scans indicated even larger submerged structures branching off from the main formation structures, still largely unexplored to this day. Geologists attempted to quell the excitement, labeling the formation as nothing more than naturally fractured beach rock, shaped by tides and erosion. But independent researchers, engineers, and marine archaeologists challenged this. They pointed out the regularity, the alignment, the step-like features, and even small channel-like indentations that mimicked ancient construction. Some noted how the blocks were interlocked, as if engineered to withstand powerful ocean currents. It didn't look random, it looked intentional. Then came the suppression. Expeditions lost funding. Researchers who claimed the site was artificial found their careers stalled or quietly sabotaged. Requests for permits to excavate deeper layers of the structure were denied. National Geographic, which had initially expressed interest, pulled back after private consultations with academic advisors. The mainstream narrative had spoken. Bimini Road was natural. The case was closed, but the evidence remains. Half submerged in shallow Bahamian waters. If the formation is indeed man-made, then its presence means a maritime civilization existed in the region long before any known seafaring society. It would mean that at the end of the last ice age, when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower, an advanced culture lived and built along what is now the ocean floor. It would mean our maps of prehistory are tragically incomplete. The road to our past may still lie underwater. But we are told not to look, to accept coincidence, to trust authority. Because if the Bimini Road is what it appears to be, then everything changes. And some truths, it seems, are too dangerous to be believed. The Azores Underwater Pyramid. In 2013, a Portuguese sailor named Diocleciano Silva was scanning the ocean floor between the islands of São Miguel and Terceira in the Azores when he saw something astonishing on his sonar screen: a perfectly geometric pyramid rising from the seabed. It stood nearly 200 feet tall, with a square base spanning the size of a football field. Even more extraordinary, the pyramid's corners aligned precisely with the cardinal directions north, south, east, and west, mirroring the orientation of Egypt's Great Pyramid. The structure was situated in a geologically volatile area of the mid-Atlantic ridge, long speculated to be the last vestige of a sunken continent. Some immediately pointed to Plato's Atlantis, which he described as lying beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. According to the legend, Atlantis disappeared beneath the waves after a series of violent earthquakes. The Azores Pyramid was suddenly more than a curiosity. It was a challenge to the official story. Portuguese military authorities quickly stepped in. They acknowledged Silva's sonar readings but downplayed their significance, suggesting the pyramid might be a submarine volcanic hill. No follow-up expeditions were launched. Scientific institutions remained silent. No peer-reviewed studies were published. The site, sitting just over 100 feet underwater, was effectively locked in a cage of uncertainty. For a discovery that could rewrite ancient history, the response was suspiciously muted. If the pyramid is indeed man-made, then it changes everything. It would point to an ancient civilization capable of seafaring, precise geometry, and monumental architecture, far from the accepted centers of early culture in the Middle East or Asia. Its location, thousands of miles from the ancient world's known powers, would indicate a global network of knowledge, trade, or colonization during a time we're told such things were impossible. But perhaps most threatening of all was the idea that this civilization did not vanish naturally, it was wiped out. If the pyramid was once above sea level, it would have had to be built more than 10,000 years ago, before the end of the last ice age. That alone renders it a historical impossibility under conventional timelines. And yet, there it is anchored in the Atlantic, ignored, denied, and unexplored. Was it lost to tectonic shifts or something else entirely? Was it part of a greater network of pyramidal sites hidden beneath the sea? The answers remain buried, not just by water and sediment, but by silence. Because if the Azores pyramid is real, then we've not only forgotten a chapter of human history, we've been taught never to look for it. Lake Michigan's Stonehenge. In 2007, a routine sonar survey meant to map shipwrecks in Lake Michigan's Grand Traverse Bay turned into something far stranger. Archaeologist Mark Hawley and his team expected rusted hulls and scattered debris, but instead, they found a stone circle lying 40 feet beneath the surface. Massive rocks, some weighing hundreds of pounds, had been arranged in what appeared to be deliberate, concentric rings, and on one of the central stones, Hawley claimed, was something even more astonishing: a carving of a mastodon. The implications were immediate and explosive. Mastodons went extinct over 10,000 years ago. If the carving was genuine and the structure human-made, it would place this site at the end of the last ice age, during a period when North America was supposedly populated only by scattered hunter-gatherer tribes. In other words, someone had not only organized a megalithic site thousands of years before the Egyptian pyramids, they'd also recorded the world around them in art. News of the Lake Michigan Stonehenge spread quickly. Comparisons were drawn to Britain's own prehistoric monument, but with one crucial difference: this one had been submerged, erased, and completely forgotten. But before any serious archaeological exploration could begin, the project was abruptly paused. The exact location of the site was never publicly disclosed. Dive access was restricted. The few sonar images released were grainy, incomplete. Skeptics called the formation coincidental random glacial deposits misinterpreted by hopeful eyes. Yet Hawley and others insisted there was more. Nearby, divers found a mile-long alignment of stones, stretching across the lake bed, resembling a prehistoric drive line, used to guide animals for hunting. Others suggested the site may have been ceremonial or astronomical in nature, oriented to solstices or star positions, like other megalithic sites worldwide. But without excavation, no definitive answers could be drawn, and none were allowed to be. Why the suppression? The site lies on land sacred to local indigenous tribes, who were consulted and requested limited exposure, an understandable request. But some researchers argue that broader political forces intervened as well. Acknowledging an ancient civilization in the heart of North America, one with astronomical knowledge and organized construction, would disrupt decades of anthropological consensus. It would challenge the belief that North America was a blank slate before European colonization. That, perhaps, was the real danger. Today, the Stonehenge of Lake Michigan remains mostly forgotten. A few scans, a few diver testimonies, and one photograph of a carved mastodon that few are allowed to verify. Yet beneath the waves, the stones remain silent witnesses to a story older, deeper, and far more complex than we've been told. If true, it means civilization didn't just emerge in Mesopotamia. It was already here, and someone wanted us to forget. The Yonaguni Monument. In the mid-1980s, off the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan's southernmost prefecture, a local diver searching for hammerhead sharks stumbled upon something that would ignite one of the greatest archaeological controversies of the 20th century. Beneath the waves, at a depth of roughly 25 meters, loomed a massive stone formation terraced, symmetrical, and seemingly carved with precision. Known today as the Yonaguni Monument, this underwater colossus has become a silent battleground between those who see it as proof of a lost civilization and those who insist it is merely rock shaped by chance. The site spans 150 meters in length and over 20 meters in height. Its features are hard to dismiss: broad, flat platforms, sharp right angles, intersecting corridors, staircase-like steps, and what appear to be megalithic blocks, fitted seamlessly together. Marine geologist Masaaki Kimura spent years mapping the structure, and claims it includes stone roads, a pyramid, gates, and even carvings resembling animals and faces. His conclusion: Yonaguni is the remnant of a lost city, submerged during the cataclysmic sea level rise that followed the last ice age over 10,000 years ago. But the establishment didn't want to hear it. Western geologists were quick to label it a natural formation, citing the area's tendency for tectonic activity and the region's easily fractured sandstone. They claimed underwater currents and seismic shifts could produce such regular forms. But critics argued that nature doesn't build perfect symmetry. It doesn't carve staircases or aligned passageways. It doesn't leave behind what appear to be tool marks or stone blocks stacked like a ziggurat. Requests for international excavations were denied. The Japanese government refused to classify the site as cultural heritage. Despite global intrigue, no comprehensive survey by independent institutions was ever permitted. What should have been a historical milestone became an academic dead zone. Researchers who supported the artificiality theory found themselves blacklisted from grants, conferences, and universities. And so, Yonaguni remains in limbo, an enigma drowned in seawater and silence. If Kimura is right, it is the oldest known man-made structure on Earth, a relic of a civilization lost beneath the Pacific before recorded history began. Its existence would force a complete rewriting of the timeline of human development, placing advanced construction in East Asia thousands of years before any pyramid or ziggurat appeared in the Middle East. But perhaps that is why it has been ignored. Because if Yonaguni is real, if it was carved, engineered, and then swallowed by rising seas, it means humanity's past is not only deeper than we imagined, it was buried on purpose. And the deeper we dive, the more the truth resists the surface. The Baltic Sea Anomaly. In June 2011, a Swedish exploration team known as Ocean X was scanning the seafloor of the Baltic Sea when their sonar picked up something inexplicable. At a depth of nearly 300 feet, they found a massive, disc-shaped object, about 200 feet in diameter, resting silently on the seabed. Its shape was eerily symmetrical, with stair-like ridges, sharp angular turns, and a strange central dome. From above, it resembled the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. But this was no science fiction. It was real. And it had no place in our known history. The object quickly became known as the Baltic Sea Anomaly. Early images revealed a trail leading up to it, as if the object had skidded along the seafloor before coming to a stop. Divers reported strange experiences. Their electrical equipment failed when approaching the anomaly, only to function again once they backed away. Cameras, radios, even satellite phones shut down within proximity. The ocean floor around the object seemed scorched, as if exposed to extreme heat. Nothing grew nearby. No marine life lingered. When samples were brought to the surface, geologists claimed the materials were simply glacial rocks, granite, sandstone, and basalt, but Ocean X countered that the structure was unlike any glacial deposit they had ever encountered. It had corridors, right angles, and smooth surfaces, as if deliberately machined. Despite widespread public interest, scientific institutions refused to fund deeper investigation. The Swedish government made no effort to explore the site. And when Ocean X sought additional permits to continue their work, they encountered bureaucratic delays, denials, and quiet resistance. Speculation exploded. Was it a sunken fortress? An ancient machine? A megalithic temple built before the last ice age? Some theorists even pointed to secret Nazi technology lost during World War II. Yet, amid all the questions, one constant remained: silence from the authorities. The sonar data was dismissed. The electrical interference ignored. The story buried beneath layers of skepticism and strategic denial. But what if the Baltic Sea Anomaly isn't a mystery to those in power? What if its presence is known and inconvenient? If the object is artificial, then it predates every known European civilization. If it's a machine, it implies technology lost or hidden. And if it was deliberately placed or crashed there, it challenges the very boundaries of human capability and time. The ocean does not give up its secrets easily, but when it does, the response is telling. Instead of curiosity, we find obstruction. Instead of exploration, dismissal. The Baltic Sea Anomaly may be more than just an object on the seafloor. It may be the physical evidence of a timeline we were never meant to know, a submerged truth that threatens to rise. The Gulf of Cambay's ancient city. In 2001, while conducting routine surveys for pollution in the Gulf of Cambay, now known as the Gulf of Cambay, off India's western coast, scientists from the National Institute of Ocean Technology detected something their equipment shouldn't have picked up: massive geometric patterns stretching across 5 miles of seafloor. These weren't natural formations. They looked like roads, walls, and basins, remnants of a planned city, now submerged under 120 feet of murky ocean. What they had found was a lost city, one that, according to carbon dating, could be as old as 9,500 years. The implications were staggering. The artifacts dredged from the site, pottery shards, figurines, tools, and even fossilized bones, were dated to a time when, according to accepted history, humans had not yet built cities. This would make the Gulf of Cambay site thousands of years older than the Sumerians or the Indus Valley civilization. It would mean that organized urban centers, complete with engineering and cultural artifacts, existed at the very dawn of the Holocene, before agriculture had supposedly even spread across the planet. The Indian government quietly celebrated the discovery at first, touting it as a civilizational breakthrough. But that enthusiasm evaporated almost overnight. Major archaeological bodies refused to recognize the site. Western scholars dismissed the findings outright, calling them sedimentary tricks or misinterpreted geological formations. The carbon dating was challenged, the legitimacy of the artifacts questioned, and just like that, the ancient city of Cambay slipped back beneath the surface, this time into obscurity. Why would a discovery of such magnitude be silenced? Because it breaks the script. If humans were building cities 9,500 years ago, then our current timeline of civilization anchored in Mesopotamia and Egypt collapses. The site also raises haunting questions. What civilization built this? Where did their knowledge come from? And what cataclysm wiped them off the map? Some suggest this city was a casualty of the rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age, a time when melting glaciers caused dramatic global flooding. If so, this could be one of many advanced settlements now resting beneath the world's oceans, forgotten by time and conveniently ignored by mainstream history. Today, there are no documentaries, no excavations, no commemorations. The city remains untouched, sealed beneath layers of silt and denial. Its discovery threatened not just historical narratives but academic reputations and geopolitical pride, and so it was buried again. But the echoes remain. In sonar scans, in artifacts that shouldn't exist, in a silence that speaks volumes. Because the Gulf of Cambay didn't just reveal an ancient city, it revealed the lengths to which power will go to protect its version of the past. The Cuban Atlántida Formation. In 2001, deep in the Caribbean waters off the western coast of Cuba, marine engineer Paulina Zalitsky and her team were scanning the seafloor using side-scan sonar when the ocean revealed a secret no one was prepared for. A vast complex of symmetrical stone structures, resting nearly 2,200 feet below the surface. The formations appeared too perfect, two geometric pyramids, rectangles, and long linear features aligned with an eerie precision. It looked like a city lost to the sea. The sonar images alone were extraordinary, but when an unmanned submersible was sent to investigate, the mystery deepened. The remotely operated vehicle captured footage of massive stone blocks, some measuring several meters across, stacked and arranged in ways that suggested artificial construction. These were not random boulders scattered by tectonic shifts. They resembled plazas, roads, and even temple-like structures. Zelitsky cautiously referred to the site as a potential urban center that had collapsed into the ocean. Others dubbed it something more chilling, Cuba's Atlantis. But here lies the problem. The structures sit at a depth that should be impossible for any known ancient civilization. For these buildings to have once been above sea level, they would have to predate the last major glacial melt, more than 50,000 years ago. That's tens of thousands of years before the earliest known civilizations. No textbooks account for that. No mainstream narrative dares approach it. And that's exactly why it disappeared from headlines almost as quickly as it arrived. Though Cuban authorities initially collaborated with the Canadian exploration company behind the find, interest from the global scientific community was curiously absent. The National Geographic Society, which had briefly shown enthusiasm, withdrew without explanation. Requests for further international funding were denied. The deeper the evidence pointed toward a civilization out of time, the more aggressively the silence grew. Was it natural? Unlikely. Was it built by a known culture? Impossible unless history is wrong. Which leaves only one conclusion. The site represents a lost chapter of humanity, one far older and far more advanced than we're allowed to believe. What happened to it? Perhaps the same cataclysmic sea level rise that swallowed other Ice Age coastlines. Or perhaps something more deliberate. A wiping of the slate. A cleansing of memory. The name Atlantida was whispered for a reason, because it echoes a pattern of destruction and erasure that stretches back beyond the earliest written records. Today, the Cuban underwater formation remains one of the most mysterious and suppressed archaeological finds of the 21st century. The data exists, the footage is real, but exploration has stopped, and the site lies forgotten, entombed beneath miles of silence and salt water, not because it was disproven, but because it worked too well.